Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with chili bean chicken. That's right, I couldn't decide whether I wanted chicken chili or maybe a roast chicken with barbecue beans. So I ended up making this, which was both. Well, actually, it was both. It was both the things I wanted, and it was also both very easy and very delicious. And to get started, we will add some roasted tomato salsa to a large mixing bowl. And this one was homemade by Rick Bayless in one of his factories and then sold in a store. And then to that, we will add some ketchup, as well as our favorite barbecue sauce. All right, anything will work, so dealer's choice. And then the same goes for the next ingredient, which is mustard. All right, I'm using yellow, but use whatever you want. And then we'll also want to add some apple cider vinegar. And I attempted to rinse some of the mustard off the spatula, which really didn't work, but that's fine. A lot of things don't work. And then to balance all these sharp acidic ingredients, we'll toss in some brown sugar. And then last but not least, a nice big splash of cold fresh water. And then before we add our beans and spices, I'm going to go ahead and grab a whisk and give this a thorough mix, although I'm really not exactly sure why. And then as far as the beans go, I'm going to use both cannellini beans, which is a beautifully meaty white Italian bean, as well as some pinto beans, which is one of my favorite chili beans. But really, any varieties are going to work here, so you decide. I mean, you guys are after all the Tommy tunes of which legumes. And then at this point, we can add our spices, starting with some nice chili powder, as well as some smoked paprika, some ground cumin, which is pretty much a mandatory ingredient in any kind of chili, I think. And then we'll finish up with some garlic powder, some freshly ground black pepper, some salt, of course, and a good amount of it. And then last but never ever least, a nice touch of cayenne. And then the only actual fresh vegetation I'm going to throw in here is some sliced green onions, which I guess are optional, but they only take a few seconds to slice. And that's it. We'll grab a spoon to give this a nice mix before we transfer that into a nice large casserole dish. And I'm going to use a nice deep one that's 10 by 15 inches, which as you'll see is going to give me plenty of room to do 8 chicken thighs. And once we have that carefully transferred in, we'll take our spoon and sort of stir and poke around just to make sure those beans are fairly evenly distributed. And then, as I like to say, it's never too late to remember what you forgot, which in my case was a little bit of dried Mexican oregano, which I will almost always add to a chili since it's so good and fragrant. So I sprinkled that over before tossing in my boneless, skinless chicken thighs. And what we want to do here is make sure those thighs are coated on both sides before we squeeze that together back into a chicken thigh shape. And the reason I don't like to cook the chicken thighs all spread out is because I want them to cook a little slower. And by sort of rolling and squeezing them back into their original shape, we're going to have a smaller, denser, tighter package. Plus, we're rolling up that very flavorful sauce on the inside, which, while I can't prove it, is probably a really good idea. And then once our chili beans have been chickened, we'll want to make sure those are evenly spaced and almost but not quite submerged. And that's it. Once we're happy with our positioning, we will possibly wipe some of the drips off the edge of the dish before we transfer this into the center of a 375-degree oven for, believe it or not, about an hour and a half, or until it looks like this. Oh yeah, that is looking good. Although at first glance it might look a little bit dry, but it is not. Okay, the reason we added that big splash of water was so this didn't get too thick like baked beans. Okay, I really wanted to go for more of a chili-like texture. And then as far as the garnish goes, since I already had them, I scattered over a few more freshly sliced green onions. And that's it. After letting it rest for just a few minutes, I went ahead and spooned up one portion. And after spooning in the appropriate amount of extra beans, I finished the top with a little bit of sauce, so it would be nice and shiny for the pictures. And also tossed on one more pinch of green onion, at which point I grabbed a spoon and a knife and went in for the official taste. Although we really don't need the knife here, since after that long bake, this should be fork and or spoon tender. But you know me and trying to eat on camera. I always have a tough time, so I was hedging my bets. And that, my friends, is every bit as delicious as you would imagine it would be. Okay, I love a good chicken chili, and this really did have a very similar flavor profile. But unlike chicken chili, it was kind of nice to have the big pieces of meat. And if you've been watching the channel for a while, you know one of my favorite things to do is take 2 recipes I love and try to mash them together to make a new recipe I'm going to love even more, which sometimes like this works incredibly well, and then a lot of times doesn't work at all, and it's a huge failure. But as you probably heard me say before, we should always want to be trying new things. Okay, if we're not trying new things, what kind of things are we going to be trying? And yes, you can do this with chicken breast, but I wouldn't. Since thighs are great cooked this long, especially in a sauce like this, but after an hour and a half, chicken breasts are going to be way too dry. So if you do use breasts, I would give the beans about an hour head start, and then toss the chicken in, and simply continue baking until they're cooked through. But whether you tweak this recipe, or make it as shown, I really did love everything about this. And whether you're looking for an easy weeknight dinner, or something to take to the next potluck, I really do hope you give this a try soon. So please follow the links below for the ingredient amounts, a printable written recipe, and much more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.